Hey creeps, Cameron here, author of Autumn Crow and Autumn Crow High, Fresh Hell, and welcome back to Library Macabre. It is a late weeknight here in the library. I've worked all day, I'm sleepy. I've decided, you know what, we're gonna stick with a very easy, simple video today, and that is a good old book haul. Sitting next to me here are several stacks of books that I purchased months ago, like a long time ago. I went to a half-price books clearance sale during the summer months. I've been to some half-price clearance / warehouse sales before, and it's always been a huge event. Like, there was one they used to have pretty close to me that was an entire amphitheater filled with tables of books, and it was the most amazing experience. I went there a couple years in a row, and then COVID hit. It wasn't until this year that I realized that they were starting to do the clearance sales again. I gotta go, right? I have to go. I have to see what they have. I was so excited. The only thing was that it was in a different city than before. It was actually very close to Cincinnati, Ohio. So it was in a different place, and I was kind of like, well, I liked it how it was before though, when it was an entire amphitheater filled with books. Like, you can't ask for better as a book nerd. So we drove all the way there and waited in line for a long time. We showed up pretty early and there was already people in front of us. They had some tables of books outside though, so that way while you were standing in line, you could kind of sort through the books and see what they had. So they had like a bunch of paperbacks and stuff for 50 cents. And by the time I reached the front door, I already had a stack of stuff going. But then we got inside and it wasn't as big as it was before. It was actually a pretty small sale overall compared to what I had seen in the past. Therefore, it was packed. Like, there were people just everywhere, and you're like this as you're walking through trying to look for books. So it was a little bit stressful. That being said, I still found quite a lot of books, which you're gonna see here in a minute. And we also decided to go to some half-price books in the area, and I found even more books. So found a whole bunch of books that day for a really good price. Like, everything was very cheap. So we're gonna take a look at all of those books. But before I do, for those who don't know, I am actually an author myself. This book here is called Autumn Crow. It's a short story collection full of Halloween-themed stories. Autumn Crow High, Fresh Hell is the first novel in a series of books that are very much in vein of, say, the books behind me here, which are Fear Street and Christopher Pike. So if you liked those kinds of books or the new Fear Street movies on Netflix, this one is definitely for you. It's got all the 90s vibes. And to everybody who has read my books, thank you so much. And especially thank you if you have left a review on Amazon or Goodreads. That helps me so much. So thank you, thank you. All right, into the books. I have a huge stack of vintage horror paperbacks. I have another huge stack of like teen and children's spooky books, and then another stack of like occult nonfiction books. The first one I have here is a vintage horror paperback, Einstein's Brain by Mark Olshaker. Look at that creepy cover, and that's not it, because it does have step back cover art. Are you ready? I guess I'm gonna have to oil the hinges. Jesus. Here is some really weird, creepy artwork. I love some good step back art, and this one is fabulous. The back of this book compares it to Coma, which is by Robin Cook, and I think I have a couple books in my pile here that compare themselves to Coma. It was a big book at the time, more of like a medical thriller. This one actually does sound a lot more like a medical thriller or science fiction book, so if you've read it, let me know what you thought. But it's going in the horror section for me. This one actually describes itself as fantasy. This is The Vampire Files, book number 6, Blood on the Water by P.N. Elrod. I've always wanted to read this series because you've got this vampire detective looking fellow. It's very noir, but with vampires, which sounds great. Totally up my alley. So I think it's a series of 6 books. I actually have all of the books. I have signed copies of all of them, but this one was a first print and I didn't have a first printing of it, so I really wanted to get this one. It's a gorgeous copy in great shape. Oh, this one worked its way into the vintage horror paperbacks. This actually should be in my stacks with the more occult kind of books. This is Triangle of Terror and Other Eerie Areas. Read the horrifying history of a triangle of terror, not off of Bermuda, but in the Indian Ocean, which I had never heard of. Learn about the ancient ship buried in the sands of the American Southwest. Travel into the vortex of a maelstrom with a man who did and came back alive. I love these. I mean, I love occult books in general and books about haunted places and weird supernatural places, but I especially like the older books like from the 70s and 80s that really just lean into it hard. It's It's so good. I also have The Tomb and Other Tales by H.P. Lovecraft. I've always wanted a copy of this book, so when I saw it at Half Price Books, I was like, oh my God, there it is, it's mine, I'm getting it. So this is a very old book. This is a first printing from 1970. This is just a collection of H.P. Lovecraft stories, so it's nothing too exciting other than the fact that the cover is beautiful. Brian Lumley has been getting a whole lot of talk lately. I think it's because his Necroscope books are being turned. Is it into a video game or a TV show? I feel like it's a video game. Maybe I'm wrong about that. This is more of like a fantasy horror where you've got vampires, but then you've got like dimensions and stuff. I don't know. I've not read his books yet, but I'm very excited to get into them. I just hear they're very dense and they take time, you know, to get into. I don't believe this is a Necroscope book. I think this is either a standalone or it's from a different series, or maybe it's loosely connected to the Necroscope books. But this one is called The House of Doors, and it has this amazing embossed cover. Of course, this is a Tor book, and Tor always did really good work. I'm going to use my glare to my advantage here to show you the texture of this cover. It's so good. A man's fears control his fate. The House of Doors waits, silent. Its dozen doors a mystery. Open one and step through into terror. Trapped inside the House of Doors, a group of scientists and spies soon determine that the menaces they battle are formed from their own subconscious fears, those terrible horrors which are impossible to control. Hellfire, eternal damnation, death, and worse assail the house's victims. One door conceals the way to safety, but all may die before they find it. Sounds a bit like The Dark Tower by Stephen King. So for all of you Brian Lumley folk out there, can I just pick this up and read it, or do I have to read any of his other books first? Let me know. Of course, I'm a Christopher Pike fan. That's why I wrote this. So when I finally found a copy of his adult novel, The Listeners, I got so excited. This has the most amazing step back cover art. Look at this face in the middle of this orb. Kind of reminds me of the Twin Peaks comeback. I mean, if you've seen season 3, you know what I'm talking about, right? But I am very eager to check this out and to read some of Christopher Pike's adult work, which I never have. I've never read any of his adult books before. I have one of his books called The Cold One, which is, I believe, a vampire novel. And then I used to own a paperback copy of Season of Passage, but I was like, I want a hardcover copy of that. And I sold my paperback, and I've regretted it ever since, because that paperback is actually very valuable now. It goes for a lot of money online, and the hardcover is pretty much near impossible to find. So I'm stuck. I shouldn't have done that. Rituals by Robert Norden. And the tagline of this says, "The prettiest children are in the most danger." A terrifying novel of small town innocence and evil. The spine of this is very creased up, but I had never seen this book before, and there was no way I was going to pass it up, because what are the odds of me ever finding it again? Possession by Ann Rule. Now, I believe Ann Rule is more of like a mystery author or a thriller author. I just know that Ann Rule is a very notable author, and a lot of people talk about her, and I figured a first print paperback edition, I should probably pick this up. It's in great condition too, like really nice. Here's another one that compares itself to Coma by Robin Cook. We've got The Atom Experiment, and this book sounds so good. I'm going to read you the tagline. "When the first child is born in space, the final horror will begin." I read that tagline and was like, yeah, I'm going to take it. It sounds so good. A near future thriller with the terror of Alien, the horror of Rosemary's Baby, and the suspense of, drumroll, Coma. There it is again. A baby conceived and born in space. Is it an alien? I hope so. That is actually a paperback from hell. I think it's featured in the book. I'm pretty sure. Dennis Wheatley. Say what? Dennis Wheatley is a British author. He wrote the original book that the film The Devil Rides Out is based on, which is a very good film, but I've never read any of his work because his stuff's kind of hard to get, especially here in the US, because, this is actually a British edition of the book. Great condition. I was so shocked to find it at Half Price Books, especially for so cheap. Again, I've never read any Dennis Wheatley books before, but I would love to, because The Devil Rides Out, the Hammer film, is so good. I would love to get that original book and read that, and then read some of his other work. I think he's pretty prolific. I feel like he's written a lot. His books are very occultish. They deal with black magic and the devil and things like that. You know, Sunday school stuff. Stephen King. I don't talk about Stephen King very much on my channel. I just don't promote his books on my channel because he doesn't need my help. Whereas some of these indie authors, I think, need more help than Stephen King. I mean, there's not a single soul and their grandma who doesn't know who Stephen King is. That being said, I love Stephen King. I have a whole collection of his books. I collect mostly first editions of his books, but I also collect paperback editions, so I am a fan. I love Stephen King. I think his stories are amazing. I think he's got some of the best concepts ever. His brain is just a kaleidoscope of wonders, horrific wonders. So we have Desperation here, and like I said, I do collect first editions of his books, so I have a first edition hardcover of this, but I recently bought the paperback edition of The Regulators, and because, you know, the hardcovers of those books go so well together, I also needed to have the paperback of Desperation to go along with my Regulators paperback. It's got that awesome step back art. And then I got a first printing paperback of The Wastelands by Stephen King, the third Dark Tower book. I have read this. I've read the first 3 Dark Tower books. I especially love Drawing of the Three, but The Wastelands is also really good. I had a copy of this already that I've had since I was a kid because I used to collect all his books when I was very little, but my copy was all creased up and the spine was faded, and this one looks so nice. It's so pretty and shiny. Here's another old short story collection, an anthology. It says 11 Stories of the Weird, the Unspeakable, and the Bizarre by Gerald Kirsch. The book itself is called Nightshade and Damnations, and it has an introduction by Harlan Ellison, who wrote a story, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. If you've read Autumn Crow, you would know that there's a short story in this book called I Have No Mouth and I Must Feed. So obviously I needed to have this when I saw that it had an introduction by Harlan Ellison. I've never read anything by Gerald Kirsch, but I'm curious to see what his work is like. I know I have a lot of viewers of my channel who are masters of this kind of stuff, so let me know what you think of Gerald Kirsch and where I should start. Richard Lehman is another author that needs no introduction. This is Darkness Tell Us, which I think will be the next Richard Lehman book that I read, because this is his book about a Ouija board. It opens up with a scene where they're like, oh, let's play with the Ouija board, and then the book just kind of goes to hell, I've heard. I've actually had a lot of luck finding Richard Lehman books in the wild lately, especially these leisure editions. I would like to collect all of the headline editions from the UK. Those ones have really pretty covers on them, but I'm also a sucker for these leisure books because these are the ones that I would see at the dollar store when I was a kid. Here's another H.P. Lovecraft-y kind of book, but it's not by H.P. Lovecraft. This is by Michael Shea, and it is called The Color Out of Time, which I think is kind of an unofficial sequel to The Color Out of Space. I have wanted this book for so freaking long because I mean, look at that amazing cover. It's got a buff skeleton. It's not really a buff skeleton. It's a guy who's like being decomposed. It's just so good. It's one of the best covers. I'm just so happy to finally have a copy of this book and to have found it at Half Price Books. It just sitting on the shelf for a couple of dollars. I was like, no way. Finally. Thank you, book gods. The Innocent Dark, which right off the bat up here, it's compared to Flowers in the Attic by V.C. Andrews. And reading the back of the book, yeah, it's basically Flowers in the Attic. You got 2 kids who are the golden children, they're called. They have a powerful, dynamic father, a beautiful, fragile mother, and a fabulous, secluded home staffed with devoted servants. But everything is not as it seems when the desperate secrets of the past, unthinkable family secrets, come back to haunt the children. Jason and Quinn discover the terror of betrayal and revenge as they become imprisoned in the Innocent Dark. Sounds so much like Flowers in the Attic, which is one of my favorite books. But if ever I want something like Flowers in the Attic, I'm bound to just pick up V.C. Andrews because there's a lot of V.C. Andrews books that I've not read. So eventually, maybe I'll get to this. But for now, it's just kind of gonna go in the collection. Tucked away like a child in an attic, Here we have a Charles L. Grant book. This one is called The Sea Harp Hotel, and it's one of his Chronicle of Greystone Bay books, which is a series of anthologies where all of the different authors write a story based in this town of Greystone Bay. It's a spooky town with foggy moonlit streets and spooky mansions and things like that. I like anthologies that have interconnected stories. The horror lives on in The Amityville Curse by Hans Holzer. For one, if it's got Hans Holzer's name on it, I'm gonna get it. He's like the master of the paranormal, basically. But then you also have Amityville. So this isn't actually the first Amityville book he ever wrote. He wrote a book called Murder in Amityville, and this is kind of his follow-up to that. Hans Holzer mostly wrote books about hauntings, true hauntings. These were kind of his dive into writing fiction. Like, these are fictional books based off of the Amityville haunting. And I've heard they're not good, but it doesn't have to be. It's about Amityville. And I'm me. Of course I'm gonna buy it. And of course I'm gonna buy a Buffy book when I see one out in the wild. This is Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the Quotable Slayer. And the quote on the front cover is, "She saved the world a lot." And I don't want to spoil Buffy for those of you who haven't seen it somehow, but this quote makes me want to cry. So thanks for putting that one right on the front cover. It's just a book full of quotes from Buffy, which of course you could have a book 5 times this size if you're going to quote Buffy, because there's so many great quotes. One of my favorite shows of all time. Scratch that. My favorite show of all time. Number 1, best show ever made, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. If you don't agree, put them up, because I'll fight you. I don't know, maybe I should wait. Because I'll probably lose. It's just carpal tunnel. I didn't sprain my wrist or anything. It's just carpal tunnel. It sucks, but it'll get better. It's fine. Here we have the 4th and final book in the Omen series, The Final Conflict, which of course is a novelization of the film. Still haven't seen this one. I've seen the first film probably 10 times because it's so good. The second one I've seen once, and then I haven't seen the other ones yet, so I do need to watch them. And next is a classic, Dracula by Bram Stoker. I have so many different editions of Dracula. This one is the movie tie-in version, of course, for the, Francis Ford Coppola film. Now, there are 2 different books that kind of tie in with the Coppola movie. There's this one, which is just Dracula, the book by Bram Stoker. And then there's another one, which is a movie tie-in, a novelization of the Coppola film. I have this one now, but I need to get the other one. That's the one that I really, really want. And now we're gonna get into all of the spooky vintage kids and young adult horror books. This first one isn't necessarily spooky or horror, kind of is. It's by Lois Lowry, who wrote a lot of teen mystery thrillers and a little bit of horror. This one is more of her like historical fiction. It's called A Deadly Promise. And as you can see, it does have a little bit of a spooky thriller touch to it. Now, for those of you who haven't read Joan Lowry Nixon, I highly recommend her. She's great. And I have a bunch more of her books that I've bought recently. And I would love to get back into her work again, because it's been a good long time since I've read any of her books. From 1976, we have a first print of The Secret in the Old House. This is actually the 2nd edition. The original one was called The Chinese Puzzle of Shag Island. We just have, a spooky mystery set in a rambling house atop a cliff. Looks very cool to me. Just Dial a Number by Edith Maxwell. Now, this looks to me more like a teen romance of some kind, but it's not. It's actually a horror novel. The back of the book says, "Someone tried to kill me." Kathy gasped into the phone. It was only a prank call dialed at random, a joke played by 4 teenagers fooling around. But what happened afterwards plunged them into a nightmare. By the next morning, 2 people were dead because of that phone call. Here we have a short story collection. This one's called Some Things Fierce and Fatal. 14 stories edited by Joan Kahn. And this is published by Avon Flair. I love Avon Flair's books. I have a whole bunch of them down here on my vintage teen horror shelf. Most of the ones I have are horror novels. This one's a short story collection. It's got stories by Ray Bradbury, H.G. Wells, and so on. And this is also a companion to Some Things Dark and Dangerous and Some Things Strange and Sinister. So still have to get those books. This is a book in the Bitten Files, which is a really rare series of teen middle grade horror books. This series is kind of a mystery to me. I've not read these before. They're actually really difficult to find. I do have a few of them now, and I plan on reading the series here soon. I think I still need to get the first book though. This one is the third book in the series, and it's called The Brain Worm. Here we have a couple books by L.J. Smith. These are the original editions from the 90s. So we've got one of her Night World books, which is called Daughters of Darkness. I have almost all of these now. I think I'm just missing one or two. And we also have book 2 of The Forbidden Game. This one's called The Chase. I've heard great things about this series. The only L.J. Smith series that I've read is The Secret Circle, which is her witch series. I highly enjoyed that trilogy, so I am excited to read some of her other books. We also have a couple of Caroline B. Cooney books, and I love Caroline B. Cooney. She's one of my favorite authors. Face on the Milk Carton, one of my favorite books growing up. This one's actually the sequel to that. It's called Whatever Happened to Chaney, which is also very, very good. She's also written a lot of Point horror books, which I also enjoy. This one she published with Point, though it's not a Point horror book. It's just a thriller, survival thriller. It's called Flight 116 is Down. And look at this. It is signed by Caroline B. Cooney. This was actually in those boxes of 50-cent paperbacks when I was waiting in line at the clearance sale. I picked this up and then I saw it was signed and I'm like, what? 50 cents? No way. So that was awesome. Made my day. Ghost Riders, true ghost stories of planes, trains, and automobiles. This is one of the Ghost House books. Ghost House published a whole bunch of ghost story, haunted place books back in like the early 2000s, late 90s. They also had a children's series, unbeknownst to me until I found this book on the shelf. I've been trying to collect all of the adult Ghost House books, and now I need to try to find all of the children's books. Godzilla versus the Space Monster. These books are so rare and highly sought after and so expensive online. Like, look them up on eBay. They are very, very pricey. In fact, I've seen some of these books on sale at Half Price Books for like $50. I think there was one that was $100 once. And I was like, what? But this was at the clearance sale for 50 cents, so I grabbed it so fast. Of course, I love Godzilla, and King Ghidorah is one of my favorite monsters that he fights, so I'm very excited to read this one. I'm sure it's going to be a good time. And it's very short, so I'm kind of hoping it cuts out all of the fat that you usually find in old Godzilla movies where they're talking about, oh, Godzilla's approaching, oh, here comes King Ghidorah, oh, they're about to meet. And then at the very end of the movie for about 10 minutes, you have them fighting. I kind of hope this is just them fighting, which is kind of all I want from a Godzilla movie, honestly. My memory card filled up, so I had to go put all my footage on my computer, but no worries, I'm back. I'm getting cozy. I'm ready to go through some more books. ESP, Stories of Strange Happenings. This is from 1981. It's a Scholastic book, probably purchased from the Scholastic Book Orders or the Scholastic Book Fair. And of course, we've got some black and white illustrations. Super Eye Adventure. This is a series very much like Choose Your Own Adventure. But not only is it like Choose Your Own Adventure, but you also have these stereographs, I think is what they're called, and you can put on a pair of glasses, a special pair of glasses, and see the image hidden inside all of these dots. There's quite a few of these in this series, but they're very rare and hard to find. There's one about Dracula that I'd really like to get. So yeah, Super Eye Adventure. It's the most Scholastic Book Fair thing I've ever seen. The House of the Seven Gables by Nathaniel Hawthorne. This is the illustrated book club Classics edition, where it's the comic version. I used to have quite a few of these illustrated Classics editions. In fact, I think I still have them, just in the paperback form. But this is like a book club hardcover edition. That's pretty neat. Railway Ghosts and Highway Horrors by Daniel Cohen. I loved Daniel Cohen when I was a kid. That's another kind of Scholastic Book Fair staple. I would get his books from the book fairs all of the time. But this one I had when I was a kid, and it scared me so much that I ended up getting rid of the book. And I'll show you what scared me. There's an illustration in particular that was just too much for me. This. That was just too much for me. And I said, no. I can handle the headless ghost from Goosebumps, because there's no gore involved, but that was just too much. I mean, God, look at this. Jeez. Pretty graphic for a children's book, but this is, this is the 90s. The 80s and 90s were a crazy time for children's entertainment. Another weekly reader books hardcover edition. This is The Riddle of Raven's Gulch. Gulch is a fun word. This is by Mary Frances Hura. This is, I guess, a mystery book first and foremost, but does have kind of a spooky cover. Another weekly reader edition. Here we have The Curse of the Egyptian Mummy. This book is fully illustrated. Yeah, lots and lots of illustrations throughout this book. Another weekly reader book club edition. This is Mystery of the Pirate's Ghost. This one probably has a lot of illustrations too. Yes, it does. Lots of black and white illustrations. The Weird Zone. Here we have book number 3, The Beast from Beneath the Cafeteria. This series looks so kooky. Another kooky looking series. This is Inside Out and More Stories to Twist Your Insides. I believe I have all of these books now. All 4 of them. There's only 4. Frankenstein. This is just a children's adaptation, abridged and condensed. I don't think there's there's no illustrations in this one, but the cover is to die for. I love that cover art. Here I found a couple of very rare Outer Limits books. So in the 90s, there was a series of Outer Limits books for kids. They were all written by John Peel, and a lot of them are very collectible and very expensive online. There are a couple that kind of show up everywhere, but then there are a couple that I never find anywhere. But I was finally able to find books 1 and 2. The Slime That Ate Crestview. This book looks so good. It looks like The Blob. Here's another choose your own adventure kind of book. This is the Plot It Yourself horror series. This one's Escape from High Doom. Now look at this beautiful cover art. And then there's also lots of awesome illustrations. Yeah, look at that. These books had the best illustrations back in the day. This is terrifying. Oh my God. Look at that. That's so scary. Here we have a Bailey School Kids book. I love the Bailey School Kids. This is the spin-off series, The Bailey City Monsters. Here is The Phantom of the Opera. This is the Bullseye Chiller edition. I love these Bullseye Chillers books. I've been trying to collect all of them. And Are You Afraid of the Dark? This one is the Tale of the Sinister Statues. As you can see, I got this for $1.99, which is like unheard of for Are You Afraid of the Dark books. I already owned a copy of this one, but mine was missing the stickers, and this still has the stickers inside. And here's another Are You Afraid of the Dark? This is the Tale of the Pulsating Gate. So rare. So rare. It's really hard to find these later books, especially. This is book 18. I also have a couple of Goosebumps books I was able to find for really cheap. Here we have Full Moon Fever, which I already owned a copy of, but this one was just in such nice condition, and it will replace my other copy. And then I also have the very rare Give Yourself Goosebumps book, Into the Twister of Terror, number 38. Finally have a copy of this goofy book. By Catriona Ward, we have Little Eve. I've heard a lot of good things about Catriona Ward's books, especially The House on Needless Street, which I own, but I still need to read. I grabbed this one for very cheap, which surprised me because this is new. This just recently came out. Ugh! And then, as promised, we have some books about the occult here. So we have, of course, one of the Mysteries of the Unknown books. This one is about hauntings. I love this series. This goes back to my childhood. I would often get these from the library and spend hours flipping through them and reading all of these accounts of spooky happenings and looking at all of the photographs, supposedly of real ghosts, and getting all freaked out. It's just a really cool series. I've got a whole bunch of these now. I'd love to collect all of them. And then there's this one, which I had never read as a kid. This is Mysteries of Mind, Space, and Time. It's the Unexplained series, and they're pretty much the same deal. We've got UFOs, hauntings, mysterious places, and there's really no subject per book. They're just kind of an amalgamation of things, so they're just numbered here on the spine. And that's the only way to really tell them apart. And there you have it. There is my massive book haul. These books have been sitting on my floor for months, and I'm so excited to get them cleaned up and dusted off and put on the shelves. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please comment down below. And even if you don't have anything to say, you can leave me an emoji or just say, hey creep. It may not seem like much, but it really does help to support the channel. Also, drop a like down below. And if you're not subscribed, I talk about spooky books every week on my channel, and I'd love to have you. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you in the next episode of Library Macabre. Later, creeps.